Hey guys, tonight we are heading out to the coast of Maine in the 1880s, where the sea spray is your only neighbor and the wind is the only thing that whispers back. You're about to take up one of the most solitary jobs in human history, the keeper of a lighthouse. It's a life of profound responsibility and even more profound boredom. A career that sounds romantic on paper, but was, in reality, a masterclass in fighting off madness with a polishing rag and a can of whale oil. Frankly, with the crushing isolation and the total lack of Wi-Fi, you probably wouldn't survive the first week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and post your location and what time it is where you are. It's always nice to see where everyone is drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The journey doesn't end at the bustling, fish-scented port of Rockland or Portland. That was just the beginning. The real journey, the one that severs the final thread to the world you know, happens in a boat small enough to make you question all your life choices. It's a dory, a flat-bottomed boat rowed by a man whose face seems to be carved from the same granite as your destination. He doesn't speak much. His vocabulary seems to consist entirely of grunts and the rhythmic creak of his oarlocks, which is somehow more expressive than a modern teenager's text messages. You're sitting on a wooden plank, your worldly possessions, a single sea chest, tucked between your feet. The air is thick with the smell of salt, cold brine, and something ancient and fishy that clings to the wood of the boat. With every pull of the oars, the mainland shrinks, its familiar green hills and scattered houses dissolving into a hazy watercolor smudge. The water here is different. It's a deep, dark, unforgiving blue-gray, and it sloshes against the hull with a heavy, hypnotic rhythm. This is the Atlantic in its natural state, vast, indifferent, and very, very cold. Your hands, already damp from the spray, feel chilled to the bone. You pull the collar of your wool coat tighter, but it feels like a flimsy shield against an ocean that doesn't even notice you're there. And then you see it. At first, it's just a smudge, a vertical disruption in the flat line of the horizon. The boatman gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod in its direction. As he rows on, the smudge grows, resolving itself out of the low-hanging mist. It's not the picturesque, welcoming beacon from a postcard. It's a stark, whitewashed stone tower, rising directly from a jagged outcrop of dark, wet rock that looks like the planet's exposed teeth. This is Mount Desert Rock, or perhaps Matinicus Rock, or maybe one of a dozen other lonely little kingdoms of granite and light. The name doesn't matter as much as the reality of it. There is no beach. There is no gentle slope. There is only the tower, a small, sturdy-looking keeper's house fused to its base, and rock. Everywhere there is rock, slick with green-black seaweed, and pounded by an endless, frothing surge of white water. It looks less like a home and more like a fortress built to withstand a siege from the ocean itself. This is your life now, a government-issued island, courtesy of the U.S. Lighthouse Board, formed back in 1852. The board took over a rather messy system and turned it into a professional, almost military service. They are your new bosses, an unseen committee in Washington, D.C., who dictate every aspect of your life through a thick book of regulations you'll soon know by heart. They provide the tower, the oil, the lens, and even a rotating box of books called the Lighthouse Library to keep you occupied. Though, as you'll discover, the previous keeper may not have been a great literary critic, and the selection can be lacking. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for keepers was a noble sense of public duty or simply the appeal of a steady, if isolating, government paycheck. Staring at that lonely rock, you suspect the answer is complicated. Getting onto the rock is the final test. There's no dock. There is only a set of iron rings and a wooden ladder bolted directly into the granite cliff face. The boatman, with a skill born of 1,000 such trips, maneuvers the dory into the churning swell beside the ladder. He shouts his first full sentence to you. Quick now! The boat rises on a wave, and for a terrifying second, it's level with the base of the ladder. You have to move, scrambling out of the boat and onto the slippery rungs before the wave falls away and drops the dory 6 feet below you. Your hands, clumsy with cold, grip the frigid iron. Seawater splashes up your legs, a final, cold welcome from the Atlantic. Your chest is heaved onto a narrow stone landing, and you lie there for a moment, breathing heavily, the smell of brine and bird droppings filling your nostrils. There's no welcome basket, unless you count the salt already crystallizing on your clothes. Below you, the boatman has already used a hook and rope to get your sea chest onto the landing. He gives you one last look, a look that's neither friendly nor unfriendly, but simply final. He doesn't say goodbye. He just gets back in his dory and begins rowing away, leaving you utterly and completely alone with the screaming gulls and the roaring sea. For a long moment, you just stand there on the stone landing, a solitary figure against the immense backdrop of the sea. The boatman is now just a speck, and the sound of his oars is completely lost beneath the constant, deep-throated roar of the surf crashing against the rocks. The gulls wheel and cry overhead. their calls sounding strangely mournful, or maybe you're just projecting. A cold, fine mist settles on your face, and you realize you can't stay out here forever. Your sea chest sits beside you, a solid, reassuring block of personal history in this profoundly impersonal place. With a sigh that turns into a plume of white in the chilly air, you turn to face the tower. The entrance is a heavy door, made of thick wood bound with straps of black iron. It looks less like the front door to a home and more like the entrance to a vault. The paint, one once a uniform service gray, is flaked and peeling, revealing the weathered wood beneath, a testament to countless storms. The handle is a simple, cold iron latch. It doesn't turn easily. You have to put your shoulder into the door to break the seal of dampness and pressure, and it swings inward with a deep, groaning complaint that echoes up into the darkness above. You step across the threshold, dragging your chest behind you, and the roar of the ocean is immediately muffled, replaced by a sudden, echoing silence. The door swings shut behind you with a solid, definitive thud that sounds like a lock turning. You are in the base of the lighthouse. The air is still, heavy, and smells of cold stone, dampness, and a faint, metallic tang of oil. There's no welcome mat. The floor is rough-hewn granite, and the circular space is filled with the tools of the trade. Large tin or copper canisters for oil stand against one wall, along with coils of thick rope, spare parts for the lamp mechanism, and wooden crates of supplies. It's a purely functional space, a workshop and storeroom with an interior design best described as early industrial dungeon. There are no frills, no comforts, just the grim necessities of the job. And in the center of it all, rising up into the gloom, is the staircase. It is a serpent of cast iron, spiraling upwards into the shadows. It's magnificent and intimidating all at once. The steps are narrow, perforated with a diamond pattern to let dirt and oil fall through, and the railing is a simple but elegant twist of iron, worn smooth and dark in places by the grip of your predecessors. This staircase is the central artery of your new world, the vertical path you will tread countless times a day. You'll get to know its every creak and groan. In fact, some keepers swore they could predict the weather based on the sounds their staircases made: a low groan for incoming fog, a sharp ping for a sudden freeze. This particular spiral staircase was likely forged in a foundry in Boston or Portland, shipped here in sections, and painstakingly assembled by men hanging from ropes inside this very stone tube. It was a marvel of prefabrication. Now, it's your personal, multi-story stairmaster, the only elevator available. You leave the sea chest at the bottom for now and begin to climb. Your boots make a hollow, clanging sound on the iron treads, an alien noise in the quiet of the tower. The ascent is immediate and steep. Round and round you go, your hand gripping the cold, smooth railing. After just a few turns, a gentle dizziness sets in. The world outside is reduced to fleeting, disorienting flashes of gray sea and sky through the tiny slit-like windows set deep into the stone walls. These windows aren't for the view. They're for light and ventilation, and they make the climb feel even more claustrophobic. You pass the first landing, a simple iron platform that leads to the door of the attached keeper's house. You ignore it for now. Your duty, your purpose, lies at the top. You keep climbing. The air grows warmer, thick with the lingering ghost of burnt fuel. This is your commute, the daily pilgrimage from the world of sleep and food to the world of the light. Historians still argue whether the circular design was purely for space-saving efficiency within the cylindrical tower, or if there was an intentional psychological effect, creating a sense of separation between the earthly duties below and the celestial ones above. Right now, it just feels like an incredibly inefficient way to get upstairs. Your legs are starting to burn. You realize this climb isn't just a part of the job. It is the job. Hauling oil, tools, and your own weary body up these steps, day after day, year after year. You're definitely going to get your steps in. You pause on the second landing, the watchroom level, just below the great lantern itself. You're breathing a little heavily, not just from the climb, but from the sheer, weighty reality of it all. You are inside the machine now, a small human cog in a great stone and iron apparatus, and your shift has just begun. You stand there on the watchroom landing, the air thin and humming with a strange energy from the great lens just one level above. The temptation to continue upward, to see the heart of the machine immediately, is strong. But a more practical thought prevails. You'll be spending more time sleeping and eating than you will be in the lantern room. Hopefully, it seems wise to inspect the place you're supposed to call home. You turn from the upward spiral and begin to descend, your footsteps on the iron treads now sounding less like a bold descent and more like a weary retreat. The journey down is quicker, dizzier. Round and round you go, the slit-like windows flashing by, until you are back on the first landing, facing a simple, painted wooden door. This door is different from the imposing iron-bound gate at the tower's base. It feels more human. It has a simple brass knob, tarnished green by the salt air, and it opens inward with a simple click, not a groan. You step through and are immediately in a different world. The acoustics change instantly. The echoing, metallic clang of the tower is gone, replaced by the muffled, pervasive hum of the ocean. It's the difference between standing next to the speakers at a concert and listening from the lobby. The air, too, is different. The cold, oily damp of the tower gives way to the scent of wood smoke, old paint, and something that might be the ghost of 1,000 boiled dinners. You're in the main room of your new home, and to call it a house feels like a generous overstatement. It's more of a barnacle of domesticity clinging to the side of the stone behemoth. The layout is what a modern real estate agent would charitably call open concept. It's one main room, serving as kitchen, dining room, and living room all at once. The far wall is the curved, unadorned stone of the lighthouse tower itself, a constant, physical reminder of your duty. You can feel a penetrating cold radiating from it. You can see why the most important piece of furniture, placed squarely in the center of the room, is a heavy, black cast iron stove. This will be your sun, your hearth, your one weapon against the relentless damp. Keepers often wrote in their logs about this dampness. It was a living entity, seeping through the mortar, making everything feel clammy, and forcing them to keep the stove running even on mild days, creating a strange, perpetual humidity. The rest of the furniture is sparse and brutally functional, all government issue. There's a small, sturdy wooden table, its surface scarred with the knife marks and coffee rings of your predecessors. Two simple, straight-back chairs are tucked beneath it. Along one wall are built-in shelves holding a few pieces of thick, heavy crockery, plates, bowls, and mugs designed not to break, not to be beautiful. A small dry sink with a hand pump sits against another wall. You try the pump, and after a few squeaking, reluctant complaints, it gurgles and produces a trickle of brownish, metallic-tasting water from the cistern. Delicious. The single window is small, with thick glass panes to withstand the force of the waves. Today, it's mostly a 4K live stream of the color gray, with streaks of condensation blurring the view of the churning sea. It's less a window and more a screen displaying your isolation. Historians still argue about the psychological impact of living in a space physically attached to the machine you served. Was it a constant, oppressive reminder of duty? Or did the hum of the tower provide a strange sort of comfort and companionship? You suspect you'll find out soon enough. Off to the side of the main room is a small alcove, which you correctly guess is the bedroom. There's no door, just an opening. In it is an iron frame bed with a thin mattress stuffed with what feels like straw or corn husks, and a small set of wooden drawers. That's it. There is no privacy, no space for personal expression beyond a nail on the wall where you might hang a picture. The entire design screams efficiency. These attached dwellings were highly standardized by the Lighthouse Board, built for pure durability. The interior decorator was a man you can only assume was named Captain Functional. You walk back into the main room and run your hand along the curved stone wall. It's cold and slightly damp to the touch. You imagine what it must be like during a storm, with the wind shrieking outside and the waves crashing so high they cover the window, plunging this little room into a dark, watery twilight. You imagine the feeling of the whole structure vibrating from the force of the sea. This isn't just a small apartment with a sea view. This is the front line, and for better or for worse, it's home. For now, it's quiet, save for the low hum of the ocean and the lonely cry of a distant gull. You decide it's time to bring up your sea chest. You'll need your own blankets if you hope to be warm tonight. The thought of sleeping on that thin, government-issue mattress without your own thick wool blankets is enough to motivate you. You turn from the doorway of your new quarters and head back into the cold, echoing stairwell of the tower. The descent is quick, your footsteps clanging a rapid rhythm down the spiral. At the bottom, your sea chest waits, looking even heavier and more stubborn than it did before. It's packed with everything you own: clothes, a few books, a tin-type photograph of your family, and the tools of your old trade. Now, it just feels like a box of anchors. Heaving it onto your shoulder, you begin the long, arduous journey back up. This is a different kind of climb. The weight is immense, pressing down on your spine, throwing you off balance with every circular step. Your knuckles scrape against the cold stone wall. You grunt with the effort, your breathing coming in harsh, ragged gasps. This climb is pure, brute force. This, you realize, will be the reality of bringing any supply up from the base. Every bag of flour, every canister of oil, every single thing will have to be conquered by this spiral of iron. After what feels like an eternity, you stagger onto the landing and half drag, half shove the chest through the doorway into your quarters, leaving it on the floor like a defeated foe. You're sweating despite the chill, but now that your nest is secured, the pull from the top of the tower is irresistible. You must see it. Leaving the quarters, you climb past the first landing once more, past the watchroom, taking the final, narrow set of steps into the lantern room. This last flight is more like a steep ladder. You push open a small trap door and hoist yourself up into the light, and you have to stop, blinking. You have entered a room made of glass and sky. You are standing in the lantern, the very top of the lighthouse, a circular chamber enclosed by massive panes of thick glass. Outside, a narrow iron catwalk, the gallery, encircles the room, offering a terrifyingly beautiful 360-degree view of the world. and it is a world made entirely of water and clouds. The horizon is a clean, sharp line in every direction. The sea, from this height, looks less like a churning threat and more like a vast, wrinkled blue-gray blanket. The sheer scale of it all is breathtaking. You feel impossibly high, impossibly exposed. But the view is not the main attraction. In the center of this glass room, mounted on a massive iron pedestal, is the reason for all of this: the lens. It is the most beautiful, intricate, and impossibly complex object you have ever seen. It's a beehive of crystal, a jewel the size of a small carriage. This is a first-order Fresnel lens, the largest and most powerful type. Standing over 8 feet tall, it was designed by the French physicist Augustin Jean Fresnel, a revolutionary invention that made old lighthouse mirrors obsolete. Before this, lighthouses use simple, polished reflectors, which wasted most of the light. This is a masterpiece of physics. It is made of hundreds of precisely ground and polished glass prisms, all arranged in concentric rings and panels around a central bullseye. Each and every piece of glass is angled perfectly to capture, bend, and focus every single ray of light from the lamp that will sit in its heart, transforming it into one single piercing beam that can slice through 20 miles of darkness. You walk around it slowly in silent reverence. Light from the gray sky pours through the lantern panes and ignites the lens from within. It seems to breathe with a cold, clear fire, throwing 1,000 tiny rainbows onto the brass fittings and the floor. You can see the faint seams where the bronze framework holds each prism in place. The glass itself is flawless, unimaginably clear. Historians and engineers still debate the sheer logistical challenge of transporting these massive, fragile lenses from the manufacturer in Paris, shipping them across the violent Atlantic, and then hoisting them, piece by priceless piece, up the outside of a tower like this to be assembled in place. One slip, one crack, and a piece worth a small fortune would be ruined. This lens is more valuable than anything you will ever own. In fact, it's more valuable than the entire stone tower that holds it. You are forbidden from touching the glass with your bare hands, as the oils from your skin can etch the surface and diminish the light. Your predecessor has left the tools on a small workbench, soft chamois cloths, a tin of polishing rouge, and a feather brush for dusting. This delicate crystal flower will be your charge, your responsibility, your entire purpose. Below the lens, you see the clockwork mechanism that will give it life. It's a beautiful piece of machinery, a series of brass gears and governors, not unlike the inside of a colossal grandfather clock. A heavy iron chain disappears through a hole in the floor, holding the massive weights that, when wound, will drive the mechanism, causing the entire 2-ton lens assembly to rotate with the silent, graceful precision of a ballet dancer. This is the heart that gives the light its signature beat, its flash pattern that sailors will use to identify their position. It is all here. The brain, the heart, and the soul of the lighthouse, waiting in the silent daylight for you to bring it to life. You wake not to an alarm clock, but to a subtle shift in the light. A dim, gray luminescence seeps through the small window of your quarters, announcing a day that will likely look identical to the one before and the one to come. The first sound you register is the sea, a constant, low rumble that you're already starting to accept as the background music to your life. The air in the room is cold enough to see your breath, and the fire in the stove has died to dull embers. But there's no time to ease into the morning with a hot cup of coffee. Your first duty, the most important duty, waits for you at the top of the tower. After a quick, joyless breakfast of hardtack biscuit dipped in water, you begin the climb. The iron stairs are cold under your boots. This ascent feels different from yesterday's explorations. It is no longer a journey of discovery. It is a commute. It is the beginning of a routine so rigid it will soon feel like the only thing holding time together. You enter the lantern room and find it just as you left it, a silent glass chamber lorded over by the magnificent lens. But your perspective has shifted. You are no longer a tourist in its presence. You are its caretaker, its servant. The job description, you reflect, is about 10% heroic guardian of the coastline and 90% obsessive-compulsive housekeeper for a giant, fragile piece of glass. Your first action is not to touch the lens, but to walk the perimeter of the room, unhooking and drawing a set of heavy, off-white linen curtains. You pull them shut, one by one, across the great lantern panes, plunging the room into a soft, diffused twilight. This is a crucial, unskippable step. The instructions to lighthouse keepers, the Bible issued by the board, is explicitly clear on this. On a sunny day, the powerful magnifying properties of the Fresnel lens could focus the sun's rays into a single point of intense heat, easily capable of setting the wooden floor, the polishing cloths, or the keeper himself on fire. The curtains effectively disarm the beautiful weapon you're about to clean. With the curtains drawn, the lantern room feels intimate, like the inside of a grand tent or a 4-poster bed for a glass cyclops. Now, the ritual begins. You fetch the tools, a soft linen cloth for washing, a supple deerskin chamois for drying and polishing, a tin of pinkish rouge paste for the brass, and a delicate brush made of turkey feathers. You start at the top. The process is always the same, top to bottom, inside and out. You begin with the highest central prism. You give a gentle flick with the feather duster to remove any loose soot from the previous night's burning. Then you lean in close, your face just inches from the cool glass, and you huff, your breath creating a small circle of fog on the prism. Immediately, you wipe it with the linen cloth, then polish it to a perfect, streak-free brilliance with the chamois. Then you move to the next prism, and the next, and the next. It is a process of intense, microscopic focus. There are hundreds of prisms in this first-order lens, and each one must be given the same reverent attention. Some keepers, to avoid losing their place in the bewildering maze of glass, would place a single dead fly on the prism where they began their work, moving it along like a game piece as they circumnavigated the lens. You find your own rhythm, a slow, circular dance around the great crystal structure. You learn the exact shape and feel of each piece of glass. You learn which ones catch the light in a particular way. It is monotonous, yes, but also deeply meditative. The world shrinks to the few square inches of glass directly in front of you. The roar of the sea fades away. Your own anxieties, the crushing loneliness, it all recedes as you focus on this one simple, achievable task. Make it clean. Make it perfect. Once the glass is done, which can take several hours, you turn your attention to the brass. Every screw, every strut of the frame, every vent and hinge must be polished. You dip a cloth into the tin of rouge, a fine, abrasive paste, and you rub. You work the paste into the metal until your arm aches. Then you wipe it away to reveal a gleam so bright you can see your own distorted reflection in it. Lighthouse historians and preservationists sometimes debate the long-term effects of this constant, gentle abrasion, questioning if it slowly wore away the fine details of the metalwork over the decades. But the regulations were clear. The brass had to shine. It was a matter of discipline, a visual representation of a well-run station. You could probably eat your dinner off this brasswork, you think, though your standard issue salt pork would likely just tarnish the shine right away. By midday, the work is done. You stand back, sweating slightly, and admire your work. The lens gleams, a radiant, flawless jewel, waiting for the darkness. You have fulfilled your primary function. Now, you just have to do it all again tomorrow. Your morning's work, the delicate and precise polishing of the lens, is done. You stand for a moment in the soft light of the curtained lantern room, the master of a gleaming, silent jewel. But the satisfaction is fleeting, because the lighthouse demands more than just careful hands. It demands a strong back. The afternoon's task is one of brute force and repetition, a chore that lacks any of the morning's meditative grace. It is time to feed the beast. It is time to haul the oil. You descend the spiral staircase, your footsteps now echoing with a sense of purpose. The destination is the ground floor, the cold, dark storeroom where you first entered the tower. As you go down, the air cools, and the faint, clean scent of polishing rouge is replaced by a much sharper, more pervasive odor. It's the smell of kerosene. This is the lifeblood of the light, the fuel that will be transmuted through the lens into a life-saving beam. For decades, the fuel was sperm whale oil, a prized, expensive substance that gave a bright light but thickened in the cold. Then came lard oil, which was cheaper but even more prone to solidifying. By now, the 1880s, the Lighthouse Board has almost universally switched to kerosene. It's cheaper, more reliable, and burns with a consistent intensity. It is also, you are keenly aware, highly flammable. Its smell clings to everything, a constant reminder of the potential energy stored in this stone tube. You are starting to think that eau de kerosene is the official, inescapable cologne of the U.S. Lighthouse Service. In the storeroom, large barrels lie on their sides in wooden cradles. A brass spigot is hammered into the end of one. Your tools for this job are not delicate cloths, but a set of heavy, lidded carrying cans made of copper or tin. They are masterpieces of function, with one side curved inwards so it can rest more comfortably against your body during the climb. You place a can under the spigot and turn the handle. The kerosene glugs out, a clear, greasy liquid that seems to suck the light out of the room. Filling the can is a careful process. You listen to the change in pitch as it fills, stopping just short of the brim. Spilling it would be a disaster. Not just a waste of fuel, but a fire hazard and a greasy, treacherous mess on the iron stairs. Dropping a full can on the climb up is unthinkable. It would be, you muse grimly, a very quick and very permanent way to get fired. With the 5-gallon can full, you screw the lid down tight and hook your fingers through the handle. You take a deep breath and begin the climb. The can weighs nearly 40 pounds. It's a dead, sloshing weight that bangs against your hip and tries to pull you off balance with every circular step. You ascend slowly, deliberately. Left foot, right foot, your body leaning into the central column, your other hand gripping the iron railing for dear life. Your bicep and shoulder on the carrying side begin to burn with a deep, insistent ache. This is a very specific kind of workout, one that promises to make you lopsided over time. Keepers developed their own tricks for this. Special grips, shifting the can from hand to hand on the landings, or even just a kind of grim, rhythmic acceptance of the pain. You can hear the fuel sloshing, a constant liquid reminder of the weight you carry. You can smell its sharp scent with every breath. Historians debate the true fire risk in these solid stone towers. While the manuals were filled with dire warnings about explosive vapors and fire, was a catastrophic blaze in a granite cylinder a genuine daily threat? Or was the board's obsession with fire safety more of a psychological tool to enforce discipline and cleanliness? Right now, with a can of flammable liquid in your hand, halfway up a dark, enclosed staircase, the threat feels very real indeed. You finally reach the lantern room, your arm screaming in protest, your breathing heavy. With painstaking care, you unlatch the lid of the can and pour the kerosene through a funnel into the lamp's main reservoir. The lamp itself is a beautiful piece of brass engineering, likely an Argan-style lamp with multiple concentric wicks to produce the brightest possible flame. Its reservoir is a large, donut-shaped tank at its base. As you pour, the smell of kerosene intensifies, filling the small space. The task is complete. For a moment, you look at the reservoir. It's maybe a third of the way full. The lamp will consume gallons of this stuff through the long night, which means you have to turn around, go all the way back down to the bottom of the tower, and do the entire thing again, and then, most likely, again. Your afternoon will be spent as a human pipeline, a weary engine of flesh and bone, hauling fuel up a spiral of iron, one painful step at a time. The last can of oil is empty, the reservoir is full, and your aching arm is finally allowed to rest. The heavy physical labor of the afternoon is over. As dusk begins to softly brush the edges of the sky, the nature of your work shifts once again, moving from the realm of brute force to that of surgical precision. The lamp is fed, but it is not yet ready. Now comes the most delicate and, in some ways, the most critical task of the entire day: trimming the wicks. This is the moment upon which the quality of the light, and therefore the safety of unseen ships, truly depends. It is, you think with a wry smile, the most stressful haircut you will ever have to give. You turn your attention back to the lamp, which sits patiently in the center of the lens, like a patient waiting for a procedure. On a small, dedicated shelf, you find the tools laid out neatly on a leather mat. These are not clumsy workshop implements. They are instruments. There is a pair of long, slender scissors, their blades uniquely designed, with a small box attached to one side to catch the falling char. There is a small metal pick and a flat-ended shaping tool. This is the toolkit of a specialist, and you are about to perform a task that allows for no error. A poorly trimmed wick is a catastrophe in slow motion. It will burn unevenly, creating a smoky, sputtering flame that will coat the pristine interior of the Fresnel lens with a greasy black film of soot. Messing this up means your morning of meditative polishing will be replaced by a grim, punishing session of soot removal. Worse, an unstable flame can create hot spots on the fragile glass lamp chimney, causing it to crack from the thermal stress. With the carefulness of a bomb disposal expert, you reach into the lens and gently lift the tall, clear glass chimney off the lamp's burner, placing it aside on a soft cloth. Now you have access to the wicks. This lamp has 3 woven cotton tubes nestled one inside the other. You turn a small knob on the side of the burner, and the wicks rise smoothly from their channels, smelling faintly of the kerosene they've been soaking in. Their tops are black, stiff, and unevenly crusted with the carbonized remains of last night's fire. That is your target. You take up the special scissors. Some keepers were so particular about this task that they refused to let anyone else, even their own assistants, handle their personal trimming shears. They believed they had a special feel for the job that simply couldn't be taught. You can understand why. You lean in, your body perfectly still, and you make the first cut. There is a soft, satisfying snip as the scissors shear through the stiff, burnt cotton. The tiny black fragment falls neatly into the attached box, preventing it from dropping into the delicate burner mechanism. You trim a tiny amount, then turn the lamp and trim again. The goal is to create a perfectly level, perfectly uniform surface on the rim of each of the 3 wicks. A single stray fiber, a tiny dip or peak, is all it takes to ruin the shape of the flame. The work is utterly absorbing. Your world shrinks down to the white, circular landscape of the wicks. You are giving them more careful, devoted grooming than a prize-winning poodle, while the official Lighthouse board manual dictates a perfectly flat trim. Some old hands and keepers developed their own secret techniques. Historians occasionally find cryptic notes in the margins of logbooks, where keepers documented their experiments with a slightly crowned or convex trim, which they argued created a more stable flame with better aeration. You, however, are new to this. You stick to the book. Flat is law. Once the trimming is done, you take the flat-ended tool and gently press and shape the top edge of the wicks, ensuring there are no loose threads, tamping it down into a uniform surface. As you perform this quiet, focused ritual, you become aware of the changing light in the lantern room. The soft gray of the afternoon is deepening, blushing with streaks of pale pink and orange at the western edge of the sky. Sunset is approaching. The regulations state that the light must be lit precisely at sundown, not a moment before, not a moment after. Your work on the wicks is the final act of preparation. It's a moment of profound, quiet responsibility. Soon, you will introduce fire to this equation. You will bring this whole magnificent machine to life. For now, you give the wicks one last inspection, one final, gentle pat with the shaping tool. They are perfect. You carefully place the glass chimney back over the burner. Everything is ready. All that is left to do is wait for the sun to dip below the horizon. The last sliver of the sun's orange rim dips below the clean line of the horizon, and the world is instantly painted in the deep violet of twilight. This is the moment. Your heart beats a little faster. You take a long, thin friction match from its tin box, strike it against the rough stone wall, and a tiny flower of sulphurous flame blooms in the dimness. You reach carefully through the access hatch at the base of the lamp, moving the match head towards the perfectly trimmed wicks. There is a soft, deep whoomph as they ignite, not one after the other, but all at once. The initial flame is yellow and smoky, but as you adjust the draft and the wicks settle, it coalesces into a single, pure, impossibly bright column of silent, white-hot light. The lantern room is flooded with a brilliance that banishes every shadow. The hundreds of prisms of the Fresnel lens catch this light and magnify its power, their facets glittering with an intensity that almost hurts to look at. This is no longer a pretty glass sculpture. It is a weapon of pure, concentrated light. You reach for the lever that releases the clockwork mechanism. With a gentle click and a low whir of gears, the great lens begins its slow, majestic, and utterly silent rotation. Now the magic happens. A solid, sharply defined beam of light, a literal spear of photons, stabs out into the deepening darkness, sweeping across the waves. As the lens turns, another beam from the next panel takes its place. The lighthouse is alive. Its great, silent, sweeping gaze has begun its nightly vigil. Your primary task is done, but your duty has just begun. The first official act of every night watch is to make an entry in the keeper's logbook. You move to a small, sturdy desk built against the wall of the watchroom, just below the lantern. On it sits the book. It's a large, imposing, leather-bound volume, its cover stamped with the words, United States Lighthouse Establishment. This is not a personal diary for your thoughts on loneliness or the existential dread of the sea. This is a government document, a legal record, and every entry must be made with the utmost precision and formality. The book has seen more drama than a Shakespeare play, you suspect, but it's all been recorded in the most boring, dispassionate language imaginable. You open the heavy cover, The pages are thick, high-quality rag paper, filled with columns and blue-ruled lines. The book smells of old paper, iron gall ink, and the faint collective presence of all the keepers who have sat in this very spot before you. The rules for its use are as rigid as the iron staircase. You must use only the approved black ink. Your pen nib must be clean. There are to be no blots, no smudges, no crossing things out. If you make an error, you must strike it through with a single neat line and add your initials. Your penmanship, which you've never given a second thought, is now subject to federal inspection. Dipping the quill pen into the inkwell, you begin to write, the sharp scratching of the nib, the only sound besides the gentle whir of the clockwork and the distant murmur of the sea. You are making the sunset entry. You fill in the designated columns, your voice a low murmur in the quiet room. Date, October 12th, 1885. Time, 7:14 p.m. Station, Matinicus Rock Light. You move to the weather columns. Wind direction, northwest. Wind force, fresh breeze. Sea, moderate swell. You check the thermometer hanging outside the lantern. Temperature, 48 degrees Fahrenheit. The final columns relate to your duties. Lamp lit at sunset. Consumed, 1/4 gill of oil for lighting. Remarks, all in good order. The remarks column is the most interesting and the most dangerous part of the log. It was the 19th century version of a social media status update, but with incredibly strict character limits and a very small audience. Here, you record anything out of the ordinary. Ships sighted, unusual weather phenomena, the condition of the station. You flip back through the previous pages, seeing the stoic script of your predecessor. Schooner Mary Ann passed, heading south. Replaced broken pane in kitchen window. Repaired mooring chain. It's the story of a life told in chores. Yet, historians know that despite the rules, some keepers found ways to embed codes or secret messages here. A note about an unusual number of cormorants, perhaps signaling a sticky gear in the clockwork to a trusted colleague. Archivists still debate the reliability of these entries. Was a keeper who noted wreckage sighted, seeing a genuine tragedy? Or was he just embellishing a floating barrel to break the soul-crushing monotony? Tonight, your entry is simple. Keeper A, Johnson, departed station 3 p.m. Keeper T, Corbin, assumed duties. You sign your name, blot the page carefully, and close the heavy book. Your first official record is complete. The long night has just begun. The heavy logbook is closed. The light turns, a silent, sweeping pulse in the profound darkness. The night stretches before you, a vast ocean of time, marked only by the slow rotation of the lens and the distant sigh of the sea. There are hours to go before the midnight watch entry is due. You cannot sleep. The regulations require the keeper on watch to be awake and alert. So, what do? Idleness is a dangerous guest in a place like this. It opens the door to loneliness, to melancholy, to the kind of deep, dark thoughts that the sea seems to whisper through the stone walls. And so you turn to the enemy, the constant, insidious, and tireless enemy that lives inside the tower with you. Tarnish. The salt is in the very air you breathe. It's a fine, invisible mist that creeps through every crack and settles on every surface, and it is relentlessly corrosive. It wages a constant, silent war against metal. Its greatest victory is the dull, greenish-blue patina of verdigris that it loves to paint on every piece of brass. Your job, therefore, is not merely to be a keeper of the light, but to be a glorified brass polisher with a sea view. You are engaged in a never-ending battle against decay, a war you can never truly win. The best you can hope for is a daily, gleaming stalemate. You pick up a soft cloth and a tin of whiting, a fine, chalky powder that will serve as your ammunition. The work is not confined to the magnificent brass of the lamp mechanism you tended to this morning. That was the ceremonial brass. This is the grunt work. You begin a slow patrol of your domain, cloth in hand. In the watchroom, you attack the bezel of the barometer, rubbing until the ring of metal around the glass face is a circle of gold. You polish the knobs on the small desk drawers, the lid of the inkwell, the decorative housing of the thermometer. Each piece requires the same monotonous circular motion. Rub, rub, rub with the abrasive paste. Wipe away the residue. Buff with a clean, dry cloth until it shines. Then you move to the staircase. The great brass knob on the door leading to your quarters gets a thorough buffing, its surface warming under the friction of your cloth. You work your way down the spiraling iron, seeking out any other metal that isn't painted black. Hinges, latches, decorative fixtures, nothing escapes your notice. You are an artist in reverse, erasing the dull masterpiece that the salt air is trying to create. You're starting to understand the affliction that other keepers call the brass disease. It's an obsession born of routine and isolation. You can easily imagine that if you ever get back to the mainland, you'll have to fight the urge to start polishing the buttons on a stranger's coat out of pure, ingrained habit. This relentless polishing is not just for show, and it's not just to keep you busy. It is a core tenet of the Lighthouse service. The board's inspectors make unannounced visits, arriving like gods from the sea on the supply tender. They would scrutinize every corner of the station, and the state of the brass work was a primary indicator of the keeper's character. Gleaming brass meant a disciplined, attentive keeper. Dull, greenish brass suggested laziness, a neglect of duty that might, they feared, extend to the light itself. A bad report could mean a stern warning, a cut in pay, or even a transfer to a less desirable, more isolated rock. Military historians sometimes draw parallels between this culture and the spit and polish of the armed forces, arguing it served the same purpose, to instill discipline and a sense of unwavering order in the face of a monotonous, high-stakes job. The rhythmic, repetitive sound of your work fills the quiet tower. Shiff, shiff, shiff goes the cloth against the metal. It's a sound that weaves itself into the gentle whir of the clockwork and the low hum of the sea. The chalky smell of the whiting powder tickles your nose. Under the steady lamplight of the watchroom, you see your work pay off in small, brilliant victories. A hinge gleams, a handle shines. You are imposing order on your small corner of the universe, fighting back the chaos 1 square inch at a time. The hours pass in this slow, methodical rhythm, your mind blessedly empty, focused only on the task at hand. The turning light above you protects the ships outside. Your turning cloth protects the station inside. Both are acts of vigilance. Both are the duties of the keeper. The brass gleams with a hard-won, temporary brilliance. The midnight log entry is still a distant shore, hours away across a sea of quiet time. The great light overhead turns on its silent pivot, and you are left with the familiar companions of a keeper on the night watch. Your hands, your thoughts, and the endless, gentle breathing of the sea. This is a dangerous time, a time when the sheer scale of the solitude can press in. The only defense is to keep your hands busy, for in a lighthouse, self-sufficiency is not a charming hobby. It's a fundamental act of survival against the relentless forces of entropy. Everything in this salt-saturated world wants to fall apart. Wood rots, metal rusts, and fabric frays. You are not just a keeper. You are a tailor, a carpenter, a cobbler, and a mechanic. You can't just go to a store or order a replacement. The supply tender is a seasonal dream, weeks or even months away. Your most important tool, besides the lamp itself, might be your mending kit. It's a simple wooden box containing heavy-duty needles, spools of thick, waxed linen thread, a block of beeswax for waterproofing, a sharp awl for punching holes in leather, and an assortment of spare buttons, clasps, and patches of canvas. It is a first aid kit for the station's weary materials. Tonight, you pull out your heavy oilskin coat, the foul-weather gear that is your primary shield against the ocean spray. You'd noticed earlier that a seam under the arm was beginning to pull apart. A small tear now could become a catastrophic leak during the next storm. You thread a large needle with a length of wax thread, your movements practiced and economical in the steady light of the watchroom lamp. Pushing the needle through the stiff, oil-impregnated canvas requires a thimble and a bit of force. The needle makes a small, resistant pop each time it pierces the fabric. You fall into the simple, repetitive rhythm of the stitch. Push, pull, tighten. Push, pull, tighten. It's another meditative act, a small ritual of restoration. You are literally holding your world together, one stitch at a time. Your resume, you muse, could now honestly list your skills as master tailor of waterproof fabrics. Once the mending is done, the coat returned to its hook. The night still stretches on. The mending was a task of necessity, but now you must choose a task to occupy the mind. This is where the keeper's true defense against madness lies, in the small, personal crafts that give the empty hours shape and meaning. Many keepers become artisans of boredom. Out of your sea chest, you pull a small block of driftwood you found on the landing, smoothed by the waves into an anonymous shape. You also take out your pocket knife, and you begin to whittle. There is no goal, not really. You just let the knife peel away thin curls of the soft, pale wood. The scraping sound is quiet and satisfying. You're not trying to create a masterpiece. You are just watching a shape emerge from your hands. Perhaps it will be a seabird or a small, crude boat. It doesn't matter. Psychologists and historians debate the function of these hobbies. Were they just a way to pass the time, or a critical form of nonverbal mental ordering, a way to impose your own small will on a piece of the universe when the universe outside felt so vast and indifferent? As you carve, a shape slowly emerges that looks less like a gull and more like a potato with a beak. But it's your potato with a beak, a tangible product of your time and focus. Sometimes, when the silence gets too loud, you might pull out the harmonica you keep in your pocket. You cup it in your hands, bring it to your lips, and breathe a simple, lonely melody into the still air of the tower. The sound is thin and reedy, and it echoes strangely off the curved stone walls, a tiny human voice against the eternal bass note of the sea. You play an old sea shanty, or perhaps a hymn you remember from childhood. It's the 19th century equivalent of singing in the shower, just much more melancholic. It is a way of reminding yourself that you are still here, a single, breathing soul in this tall stone cylinder. The song ends and the sound fades, leaving only the whir of the clockwork and the turning of the light. The watch continues. The nightly rhythms of mending and polishing, of log keeping and watching, have become second nature. But the lighthouse has other, grander demands that can only be met when the sea and sky agree to a temporary truce. Today is one of those rare, perfect days. A high summer sun warms the granite of the tower. The sea is a gentle, swelling sheet of deep blue, and the wind is just a whisper. This is a day for painting. The tower's brilliant white coat is its daytime signature, a crucial navigational aid known as a day mark. But the past winter's storms and the constant salty spray have left it stained and peeling, a mottled gray instead of a stark white. Your job today is to restore its brilliance. This task doesn't begin with a can of ready-made paint. It begins with chemistry. In a large wooden barrel near the base of the tower, you mix the official Lighthouse Board recipe for whitewash. You pour in bags of lime, adding salt, which helps the mixture cure, and finally, water. You stir it with a long wooden paddle, and the mixture heats up, bubbling and hissing as the lime slakes. The smell is sharp, chalky, and clean. You keep stirring until it becomes a thick, smooth, blindingly white liquid. Some keepers, you've heard, secretly added their own ingredients to the mix: rice flour, animal glue, anything they thought might make the paint stick to the stone a little longer against the coming winter gales. The paint is ready. Now comes the part that separates keepers from sane men. You can't use a ladder to paint 100-foot-tall stone cylinder surrounded by jagged rocks. You must use a bosun's chair. At the very top of the tower, you rig your equipment to the iron gallery railing. The chair itself is little more than a sturdy plank of wood, about 2 feet long, with ropes running through holes at each corner, meeting at a central point above. It is a swing, a baby swing for a grown man, dangling over a fatal drop. You check your knots 3, then 4 times. Your life depends entirely on these loops of rope. Maritime historians often marvel at the rudimentary equipment used for such a perilous job, debating whether the keepers grew immune to the fear or simply accepted the risk as part of the duty. With a bucket of whitewash hooked to the chair, you take a deep breath, climb over the railing, and commit yourself to the void. For a terrifying moment, you swing free, your stomach lurching as you drop a few feet before the ropes catch your weight. You are outside. The solidness of the tower is at your back, and the whole of the Atlantic Ocean is spread out beneath your dangling boots. The view is absolutely breathtaking, but you're a little too busy concentrating on not plummeting to your doom to fully appreciate it. The rocks below are a jagged maze, laced with white foam. The sound of the surf is clearer out here, a constant, gentle roar. The gulls, however, are not so gentle. They swoop and dive around you, screeching their indignation at this strange, paint-splattered creature invading their airspace. Your job title, you think, should be amended to include high-angle painter and professional bird dodger. The work itself is a slow, rhythmic dance of descent and application. You brace your feet against the rough granite blocks to keep from spinning. You dip the thick brush into the bucket and slap the whitewash onto the tower in broad, even strokes. The sun is hot on your neck and shoulders. The gentle breeze sways you back and forth, a hypnotic, unnerving motion. You paint everything in reach, a wide arc of brilliant white against the dull gray stone. Then you carefully play out a little more rope, lowering yourself another few feet, and begin again. Section by section, you work your way down the tower, a human pendulum, leaving a trail of gleaming white in your wake. This is a job of intense physical focus and mental fortitude. Every muscle in your arms and back is engaged, both in the act of painting and in the simple, constant act of staying balanced and secure. You don't look down, not after that first terrifying glance. You focus on the stone in front of you, on the feel of the brush, on the satisfying way the brilliant white covers the stains of the past year. You are an artist, and your canvas is a cylinder 100 feet tall. It is exhausting, terrifying, and in a strange way, absolutely exhilarating. You are a tiny white speck on a tall stone tower, suspended between the vast blue sky and the endless, indifferent sea. The weeks have blurred into a long, slow tide of routine. Summer has reached its peak and is now beginning to fade into the crisper air of early autumn. You've become so accustomed to the solitude that the sound of your own voice, when you speak aloud to test it, sounds foreign and intrusive. You've counted your tins of salted beef, you're rationing your coffee, and you've read every book in the little rotating library twice, including the dreadfully dull treatise on agricultural drainage. You've started naming the more persistent seagulls, which you know is a sure sign that the tender needs to arrive soon. Part of your daily ritual, as ingrained as cleaning the lens or checking the clockwork, is scanning the horizon. After the morning chores are done, you take the station's spyglass, a long, heavy tube of brass and leather, out onto the gallery catwalk. You brace it against the iron railing to steady your hands, and you begin the sweep. You start in the north, a slow, methodical pan across the endless, empty line where the gray-blue sea meets the pale blue sky. Then you track south, your eye pressed to the cold metal eyepiece. Most days, it is a study in emptiness. You see distant fishing schooners, their sails like tiny white chips, or the smudge of smoke from a passing steamer far out on the shipping lanes. But they are not for you. They are part of a different world. The disappointment is a familiar, quiet pang you've learned to swallow. But today is different. As you sweep south, you stop. There is something there. It's a tiny dark speck, too solid to be a wave, too persistent to be a bird. Your heart gives a sudden, sharp thump against your ribs. You grip the spyglass tighter, your knuckles white. You carefully turn the brass focusing ring, your breath held tight in your chest. The blurry speck swims in the lens and then sharpens into a clear, undeniable image. It is a plume of dark smoke rising vertically in the still air, and beneath it, the unmistakable silhouette of a ship. Not a sailing ship, a steamer. Your mind races. Could it be a random vessel, blown off course? You track the ship's path. It is heading directly for you, directly for this lonely rock. A wave of profound, bone-deep relief washes over you, so intense it almost makes your knees weak. It is the tender. It can only be the tender. You focus the spyglass again, trying to confirm. Yes, you can make out the sturdy, functional shape now. It's the Lighthouse Service tender iris, a workhorse of a ship, built not for speed, but for reliability. You can see the dark shape of the derrick on its deck, the one used for hoisting supplies. The black smoke pouring from its funnel is the most beautiful sight you have seen in 3 months. It is the smoke of civilization. It is the smoke of human connection. It means mail, food, news, and other faces. This is the 19th century version of a food delivery service, you think wryly, but the wait time is considerably longer, and the delivery driver is famously judgmental. Because with the relief comes a second, colder wave of emotion, anxiety. The inspector is on that boat. Your quiet, solitary kingdom, where you are the absolute monarch, is about to be invaded, scrutinized, and graded. Suddenly, you see your entire station through a different set of eyes. Is the brasswork in the watchroom truly gleaming or just passably shiny? Did you record the wind direction correctly in the logbook last Tuesday? Is there a hint of soot on the upper prisms of the lens? This jolt of adrenaline sends you into a flurry of motion. You rush inside, down the echoing stairs, and begin a frantic, last-minute tour of inspection, like a college student tidying up moments before a surprise visit from their parents. You give the barometer casing a furious, final polish. You straighten the books on the shelf. You sweep the floor of the kitchen, chasing a few stray crumbs that suddenly look like evidence of gross negligence. Historians who read the personal letters of keepers often note this deep ambivalence, toward the tender's arrival, debating whether the joy of resupply outweighed the stress of the inspection. Right now, for you, it's a very close race. But as you climb back up to the lantern room to watch the ship grow steadily larger on the horizon, the relief wins. The siege is almost over. You are, for a little while at least, no longer alone. The deep, rattling groan of the tender's anchor chain playing out is the first sound of the outside world you've heard in months. The ship, the sturdy Iris, settles into the water a few hundred yards offshore, a safe distance from the treacherous shoals that surround your rock. It looks immense, a floating mountain of iron and industry. You can hear the hiss of its steam engine, the shouted commands of the boatswain on deck, and the clatter of equipment. The smell of its coal smoke drifts on the breeze, temporarily overpowering the familiar scent of salt and brine. A crew is already lowering the ship's launch, a heavy workboat, into the water. Your isolation is officially over. The launch makes its way towards you, skillfully navigated through the swell by two burly seamen at the oars. In the stern sits a man who needs no introduction. Even from a distance, you recognize the stiff posture and the dark regulation uniform of the district inspector. As the boat reaches the landing, he is the first one out, leaping onto the stone with an agility that belies his stern appearance. He gives you a curt nod. There are no pleasantries, no questions about your health or well-being. His visit has one purpose: scrutiny. "We'll begin in the lantern room, Keeper," he says, his voice crisp and authoritative. The inspection has begun. For the next hour, you are his shadow, your heart lodged somewhere in your throat. You follow him up the spiral stairs, praying he doesn't notice the faint scuff mark on the third step. In the lantern room, he doesn't gaze at the view. He inspects the lens. He runs a white-gloved finger, the most feared weapon in the entire lighthouse service, along the brass pedestal of the lamp. You hold your breath. The glove comes away clean. You allow yourself a flicker of relief. He checks your logbook, his eyes scanning for any irregularities, any sloppy penmanship. He checks the state of your supplies, the cleanliness of your quarters, the condition of the paint in the storeroom. It is a thorough and nerve-wracking ordeal. While the inspector is busy judging your every life choice, the real work begins outside. The launch is now a frantic shuttle, ferrying load after load from the tender to the rock. This is where the true danger lies. The boat, loaded with crates and barrels, rises and falls dramatically on the rolling waves. The men in the boat must time each surge perfectly, hoisting a heavy load up to you on the landing at the very peak of the wave. Your job is to grab it, brace yourself, and haul it to safety before the boat drops away from you. It's a furious, rhythmic dance of muscle and timing. Your back, already familiar with the ache of hauling oil, is about to tender its resignation. But the cargo is beautiful. It is life itself. There are heavy barrels of flour and cornmeal, sacks of potatoes and onions, whose earthy smell is intoxicating after months of preserved food. There are crates of tinned milk and canned tomatoes, a modern luxury that feels like a miracle. And there are the essentials of your trade, more barrels of kerosene for the lamp, new wicks, spare lamp chimneys, carefully packed in straw. And then you see it, a simple, sturdy canvas sack, tossed onto the landing with the rest of the goods, the mail. Your hands itch to grab it, to tear it open and devour the letters and old newspapers inside. But there is no time. The work is too fast, too relentless. Historians debate the nutritional value of this diet, heavy on salted and tinned goods. But to you, a sack of potatoes looks as precious as gold. The pace is unrelenting. A wave surges higher than expected, just as a boatman hefts a crate towards you. The boat lurches. He loses his footing for a second, and the crate, full of priceless, fragile lamp chimneys, slips. It teeters on the very edge of the slick stone landing. You lunge, ignoring the protest of your muscles, and grab one corner while the boatman recovers and shoves it from the other side. For a heart-stopping moment, the crate hangs over the churning water, and then with a final, collective grunt, you haul it to safety. You exchange a grim, knowing look with the boatman. No words are needed. The sea nearly claimed its tax. Finally, after what feels like an entire day of back-breaking labor, the last barrel is rolled onto the landing. The tender's launch is empty. Your tiny kingdom is restocked for the coming winter. Your muscles ache with a deep, satisfying soreness. The last of the supplies are now stacked securely in the storeroom or on the landing, a fortress of sustenance against the coming winter. The inspector is finishing his final notes with the bosun, and the tender's crew are resting on their oars in the launch, waiting for the return trip. In this brief lull, with the hard labor done and the judgment phase nearly over, you finally allow yourself the reward. Your eyes find the simple canvas mail sack, and you feel a pull stronger than any tide. With a nod from the inspector, you heft it onto your shoulder. It feels both heavy and light, weighted with paper, but buoyant with promise. You retreat into the quiet solitude of your quarters, closing the door on the voices and the activity outside. This is a private sacrament. You need to be alone for this. You swing the sack onto your small wooden table, and for a moment, you just look at it. It's a lumpy, unassuming object, stained with salt and grime from its journey, but inside it is the whole world. or at least the world as it was 3 months ago. You untie the thick drawstring and upend the sack. A cascade of letters, bundled newspapers, and official-looking envelopes from the Lighthouse board spills out across the table. The room suddenly smells of dry paper, ink, and places that are not here. Your hands, clumsy with anticipation, search first for the personal letters. Your heart gives a jolt as you see your mother's familiar, spidery handwriting on a sealed envelope. You find another from your brother. You carefully break the wax seal on your mother's letter, your hands trembling just slightly. The letter is dated August 10th. You are reading it in late October. You scan the pages, drinking in the news. Your cousin Sarah was married in September, a fact you're learning a month after the fact. The old dog on the family farm is doing well. They had a good harvest. Each piece of news is a strange mix of warmth and melancholy. You are overjoyed to hear it, but the knowledge lands with a strange finality. You are not just reading news. You are reading history. These events are over, set in stone, and you are receiving the information like an archaeologist uncovering a tablet. After the precious letters are read and reread, you turn your attention to the newspapers. They are bundled with twine, weeks of the Boston Daily Globe or the Portland Press Herald. You are now the most well-read man on the island, as long as the topic of conversation is from last summer. You spread the first one out. The headline declares a political debate that you know, from a snippet in your mother's letter, has long since been resolved. You read about heat waves that have long since broken, about local fairs that have already been packed away. You're just now finding out who won a local election, and you chuckle, realizing they've probably already had time to become unpopular. Sociologists debate the psychological effect of receiving such stale news. Did it make the keepers feel more isolated, hopelessly behind the times? Or did it provide a strange sort of comfort, a stable narrative of a world that continued on, predictable and orderly, without them? For you, it feels like both. The news of national politics and international affairs feels abstract, like a story being told about a faraway land. A diplomatic spat with Spain feels less real than the crack you need to patch in the storeroom window. But you linger over the small things. The advertisements feel like messages from a kind of utopia. An ad for a new brand of shaving soap with bold claims of a lather that lasts seems impossibly luxurious. You read the shipping news, noting the names of vessels that have long since reached their destinations. You read the tide charts for a month that is already gone. Some keepers, you've heard, would ration this treasure. They would read only one letter a day, one page of a newspaper each night. stretching the connection out, making it last for weeks. It's a tempting thought, a way to stave off the inevitable return to silence. But the hunger for information is too strong. You devour it all, page after page, soaking in the details of a life that is happening elsewhere. For a few hours, in the quiet of your room, surrounded by the rustling of old paper, the tower is no longer an island. It is a library, a post office, and a time machine, all at once. The tender is a speck once more, a memory of voices and activity that quickly dissolves back into the vast, indifferent blue. The supplies are stored, the letters are read, and the profound, echoing silence of your solitary life rushes back in to fill the space the ship left behind. The first day after the tender leaves is always the hardest. The loneliness, briefly banished, returns with a vengeance, a palpable presence in the quiet rooms of your station. You settle back into the familiar rhythm of polishing and watching, the slow tide of your routine pulling you back under. A few days later, you wake to a different kind of silence. The usual sound of the waves crashing against the rocks is gone, replaced by soft, muffled lapping. The air in your quarters feels heavy, thick with a dampness that has nothing to do with the sea spray. You look out the small window and see nothing. Not the horizon, not the sea, not even the rocks at the base of the tower. The world has been erased, swallowed by a dense, wet, featureless gray wall of fog. It presses against the glass, silent and absolute. The light in the lantern, your primary weapon, is now useless. Its brilliant beam can no more pierce this thick blanket than a candle can illuminate a cave. When the tower is blind, it must be given a voice. This is a new kind of emergency, a silent, creeping one. You hurry to the small building attached to the tower that houses the fog signal mechanism. For this station, it is a great bronze bell, weighing more than 1,000 pounds, housed in its own small, open-air turret. The bell itself is silent, but the machine that operates it is a hulking beast of iron gears, levers, and one truly enormous weight, connected by a cable that runs down a long shaft into the tower's foundation. Your new job, for as long as this fog lasts, is to keep this machine alive, and the machine is hungry for your labor. You grab the large iron hand crank and fit it to the main drum of the clockwork. Then you begin to turn. It is an act of pure grinding toil. Your entire body strains against the immense weight, your muscles screaming as you slowly, painfully, crank the great iron slab from the bottom of its shaft back up to the top. It takes dozens upon dozens of turns, each one a separate, agonizing effort. By the time the weight reaches the top, you are drenched in sweat, your arms and back burning. You have just wound the clock. With a pull of a lever, you engage the mechanism. There is a slow, deliberate clack-clunk of gears engaging, and then a heavy hammer draws back and strikes the lip of the great bell. The sound is instantaneous and cataclysmic. It is not a musical chime. It is a deafening, bone-shaking bong that explodes through the fog, a physical force that seems to vibrate in your teeth and sternum. The sound is designed to be heard for miles over the water, and you are living at its epicenter. 30 seconds of near silence follow, and then the hammer strikes again. Bong. And again. And again. This will be the soundtrack to your life until the fog lifts. The clockwork will run for 2 hours on a full wind, which means every 2 hours you must repeat the back-breaking process of cranking that colossal weight back to the top. Day and night. Sleep becomes a fantasy. You might catch 20 minutes of fitful, exhausted consciousness on a cot in the watchroom, but the relentless, deafening clang of the bell every 30 seconds makes true rest impossible. The keepers and their families who endured this often suffered from hearing loss and nervous exhaustion. They spoke of hearing phantom bells for weeks after a fog had lifted. Your world shrinks to the inside of this tower, a space filled with a clangorous roar, surrounded by a wall of white nothingness. You can't see the sea. You can't see the sky. You only see the swirling gray mist just beyond the railing. Days pass. You lose track of time, your life measured only in the intervals between the winding of the clockwork and the shattering clang of the bell. You are a prisoner in a cloud, a servant to a screaming machine, your only purpose to send a warning cry out into a world you can no longer see. Winter has locked the world in its grip. The sea is no longer the deep, familiar blue of summer, but a cold, hard, metallic gray, churning and restless. The sun is a pale, watery disk that offers little warmth. The cold is a physical entity, a presence that seeps through the thick stone walls of the tower, making the iron of the staircase painful to touch with a bare hand. Your life has shrunk to the small circle of warmth offered by the stove in your quarters, and the ever-present, ever-turning light above. You learn to read the signs. The first warning of the storm is not wind or rain, but an unnatural quiet and a strange, heavy swell in the sea. The waves become long, oily, and smooth, even with no wind to drive them. The barometer in the watchroom begins a steady, inexorable plunge, its needle dropping like a stone. You look out onto the gray water and notice the gulls are gone. They have fled to the relative safety of the mainland, a sure sign that something terrible is coming. You make your preparations. You check the seals on the windows. You bring in extra fuel for the stove. and you make sure the lamp in the lantern is full and the wicks are perfectly trimmed. You are battening down the hatches of your stone ship. The wind arrives first. It begins as a low, mournful moan, a sound that seems to rise from the sea itself. Within an hour, it is a high, piercing shriek. It is a physical force pressing against the tower, trying to find a way in. It screams and whistles around the lantern's glass, a wild, insane symphony that never ceases. You are sealed inside a giant stone flute, and the devil himself is blowing into it. Then the sea awakens. The oily swells sharpen into jagged peaks, and then into colossal, chaotic mountains of black water. The wind rips the tops from the waves, turning the air into a thick, horizontal blizzard of salt spray. Soon, you hear the first true impact. It is a sound unlike any other, a deep, earth-shaking boom that is felt as much as it is heard. A wave, the size of a house, has just struck the base of the tower. The entire structure shudders, a deep, resonant vibration that travels from the granite foundation up through the iron staircase and into the fillings of your teeth. You don't need to check the barometer now. You can feel the storm's power in your bones. Soon, the impacts are constant. Boom, boom. A relentless, deafening artillery barrage from the ocean. You are living inside a drum that a giant is beating. The sound is overwhelming, a sensory assault that erases all possibility of quiet thought. And then comes the water. You look out the thick glass of the lantern and see something that seems impossible. Green water, not spray, not mist, but a solid sheet of the Atlantic Ocean, washing over the glass, 100 feet above the sea's normal level. The light from your lamp refracts through it, creating a momentary, terrifying, underwater world. Then it's gone, cascading down the sides of the tower in a waterfall, leaving the glass weeping and streaked. Your duty does not stop for the storm. In fact, it becomes more critical than ever. A ship caught in this tempest needs your light desperately. You make the perilous climb up the vibrating staircase, your hand clamped tight on the railing. In the lantern room, the noise is at its peak, a terrifying chorus of shrieking wind and hissing spray. You check the lamp. The constant vibration can cause the flame to flutter and smoke, so you make a tiny, delicate adjustment to the wick, your hand steady despite the chaos around you. Keepers in towers like this sometimes swore they could feel the structure swaying at the height of a storm. While probably a trick of the mind, the sensation was so real it became lighthouse legend. You stand your watch, a single, tiny, conscious speck inside a stone cylinder, holding a candle against the most profound darkness you have ever known. Structural engineers, with their modern computers, would later calculate that these towers were overbuilt to a staggering degree. But right now, as another wave hits with the force of a freight train, you hope more than you know that their calculations are correct. After 2 days of relentless, violent noise, the silence, when it finally comes, is the most profound sound of all. The wind, having screamed itself hoarse, dies away into a weary sigh, and then nothing. The thunderous artillery of the waves recedes into a sullen, exhausted roar. Inside the tower, the deep, bone-shaking vibration ceases, leaving an almost unnerving stillness. You have survived. The tower has held. Through the long, dark hours, you kept the light turning, a tiny defiant pulse in the heart of the storm. Now, utterly spent, you can finally allow yourself a few hours of deep, dreamless sleep. You awaken to a strange, pale light filtering into your quarters. It's morning. You get up and look out the small window, and for a moment, you don't understand what you are seeing. The world has been remade. The familiar gray sea and black rock are gone, replaced by a landscape of brilliant, glittering white. The ocean, it seems, has decided to redecorate, and its chosen material is several tons of very inconvenient ice. You push open the heavy door to the tower and step into a world transformed. Every surface is encased in a thick, milky shell of frozen sea spray. It is a work of breathtaking, alien beauty. The storm's fury and the freezing air have flash frozen the spray as it hit, sculpting it into fantastic shapes. The iron gallery railing at the top of the tower is no longer a thin line, but a thick, lumpy, glistening banister, 3 times its normal size. Long, sharp icicles, some as thick as your arm, hang from it like the teeth of a great beast. The fog bell in its turret is completely entombed, a silent, white mound. The granite blocks of the tower itself are smoothed over, the cracks and seams erased by a smooth, white coating that glitters and flashes in the pale morning sun, throwing off dazzling rainbows. It is as if the entire station has been dipped in liquid diamond and left to freeze. But this fairy tale beauty is a mask for immense danger. The sheer weight of the ice, many, many tons of it, is putting a tremendous strain on the entire structure. The gallery railing could buckle. The roof of the Fog Bell house could collapse. And most critically, the lantern panes at the top of the tower are completely opaque, covered in a layer of ice several inches thick. Your light, the very reason you exist on this rock, is trapped inside, its powerful beam reduced to a dim, useless glow. The lighthouse is blind. Your admiration for the spectacle lasts only a moment. The work must begin. You bundle yourself in every layer of wool you own and gather your tools, a heavy wooden mallet and a long-handled scraper with a brass blade, specifically designed not to scratch the precious glass of the lantern. Your new job title is de-icing technician, a role that was definitely not featured in the recruitment brochure. You make your way carefully up the stairs. The interior of the tower is now even colder. The massive shell of ice on the outside leaching all the warmth from the stone. Reaching the gallery catwalk, you find your first task is simply to clear a safe path to stand on. You chip and scrape at the thick ice underfoot, sending it shattering onto the rocks below. Then, you turn to the lantern panes. You cannot simply smash the ice. The risk of breaking the priceless, custom-curved glass is too great. You have to work carefully, methodically. You tap the surface of the ice with the wooden mallet, not hard, but with a sharp, percussive rhythm. A web of cracks appears. Then you use the brass scraper, wedging it into the cracks and prying. A huge plate of ice, the size of a tabletop, groans in protest and then breaks free, falling away from the tower and exploding into 1,000 pieces on the rocks below with a distant, satisfying crash. It is slow, cold, back-breaking work. Your breath freezes in clouds in front of your face. Your fingers, even inside thick gloves, quickly become numb. You work your way around the lantern, pane by pane. Tap, tap, crack, pry, scrape, crash. In the keeper's logs, this phenomenon was recorded with a kind of grudging respect for its artistry, with mentions of ice feathers and frozen chandeliers. Meteorologists still study these accounts to understand the precise combination of wind and cold that could create such a spectacle. For you, it is simply one more battle in the long war against the elements, a battle to be fought and won so that the light can once again be seen. The world is gray again. The fog, a persistent and unwelcome guest, has returned, pressing its damp, silent weight against the tower. The brilliant, sweeping beam of the Fresnel lens is once more a prisoner, its light smothered just feet from the lantern glass. And so, your duty shifts from the visual to the audible. The tower must speak, and you are its voice box, or more accurately, the muscle that powers it. You make your way to the fog signal house, the familiar sense of grim resignation settling over you. It is time to wind the clockwork. The mechanism that powers the fog bell is a masterpiece of 19th century brute force engineering. It is a close cousin to the elegant clockwork that turns the lens, but built for power, not precision. It is bigger, louder, and far more demanding. A series of large cast iron gears, their teeth thick with heavy, black grease, dominates the space. At its heart is a governor with 2 heavy iron balls that will spin to regulate the timing. ensuring the bell strikes at its prescribed interval. But all of it, the gears, the governor, the heavy striking hammer, is powered by a single, simple force, a colossal block of iron hanging at the end of a thick cable, which descends into a dark, narrow shaft in the tower's foundation. Your job is to fight gravity. Your job is to haul that weight back to the top. You take up the winding crank. It's a heavy, T-shaped piece of iron, cold and greasy to the touch. You fit its square end into the socket on the main winding drum. Brace your feet on the stone floor and lean into the first turn. Nothing happens. The weight at the bottom of the shaft is a dead, stubborn anchor, and the initial inertia is immense. You have to put your entire body into it, your shoulders, back, and legs straining in unison. The inventor of this machine, you think with a grunt, was clearly not the man tasked with operating it. With a deep groan of protesting metal, the drum begins to turn, and so begins the most exclusive and least enjoyable exercise program in the world. Turn after turn, you force the crank in its slow, wide circle. Each rotation is a small, hard-won victory. The gears complain with a low, grating roar. The cable creaks as it winds onto the drum. Your own breathing becomes a harsh, ragged counterpoint to the mechanical sounds. Sweat begins to bead on your forehead, then drips, stinging your eyes. You are a human engine, converting your own energy into potential energy for the machine. Industrial historians debate the efficiency of these systems, arguing about how much of a keeper's effort was lost to friction. But you don't need a historian to tell you it feels like most of it. Your world shrinks to the task at hand. You watch a small chalk mark on the drum come around, again and again. You count the rotations in your head, losing count and starting over. You can feel the muscles in your arms and back begin to tremble with fatigue, a deep, burning ache that settles into your bones. The bell gets to rest for 29 seconds between each mighty strike. You get no such luxury. This is a continuous 10-minute battle against an unfeeling opponent. Keepers would sometimes develop a strange antagonistic relationship with the clockwork, seeing each completed winding as a personal triumph over the machine's inherent stubbornness. Finally, you see the marker indicating the weight is nearing the top of its shaft. With the last few agonizing turns, it clunks into its uppermost position. You are done. You pull the crank free, your hands shaking, your arms feeling like lead. You lean against the cold stone wall, panting, every muscle screaming. You have bought 2 more hours of sound. You pull the engagement lever, and the great machine comes to life. The governor spins, the gears turn, and the hammer strikes the bell with its deafening, periodic bong. you listen to the sound, the product of your sweat and toil, as it punches its way through the thick fog. Then you check the clock. In 1 hour and 50 minutes, you will have to come back and do it all over again. For all this time, we have pictured you as a solitary figure, a man alone against the elements, your only companion, the turning light and the sound of the sea. But imagine for a moment that you were not alone. Imagine that after months of solitary duty, the supply tender brought you not just barrels of oil and sacks of flour, but your family, a wife, and perhaps 1 or 2 small children, stepping onto the slippery rock, bringing with them the entire complicated and beautiful world of domestic life to a place that seems actively hostile to it. The arrival of your family changes everything. The profound silence you had grown accustomed to is gone, replaced by the sound of your wife's humming as she works in the small kitchen, the sound of a child's laughter, or the sharp cry of a toddler who has taken a tumble on the rough stone floor. The small, grimly functional keeper's quarters, one once just a place for you to eat and sleep, must now become a home. The loneliness is banished, but in its place comes a new and constant kind of worry, a vigilance that is deeper and more personal than just watching for ships in the night. Your wife proves to be as much a keeper as you are. She is the keeper of the hearth, battling the persistent damp that tries to creep into your blankets and clothes. She is the keeper of rations, figuring out how to make a nourishing meal from salt pork and tinned tomatoes, how to make the flour and sugar last until the next season's supply run. Soon, she learns the moods of the light as well as you do. Many keepers' wives became unofficial, unpaid assistants. She might learn to trim the wicks, to polish the lens, or to stand the early morning watch, allowing you a few precious, uninterrupted hours of sleep, a luxury you had long since forgotten. And the children. What is it like to be a child whose front yard is a few dozen square feet of granite surrounded by a churning, deadly sea? Their playground rules are the starkest imaginable. Do not go near the edge, ever. There are no trees to climb, no soft fields to run in. Instead, they learn to play on the cold stone, inventing games with shells and bits of driftwood. They learn the names of the seabirds, not from a book, but from watching the gulls and terns wheel and dive. The rhythmic flash of the great light sweeping through their bedroom window at night becomes their nightlight, a familiar, comforting pulse. Their education falls to you and your wife. The small kitchen table becomes a schoolhouse, a handful of books brought from the mainland, a Bible, a copy of Shakespeare, a well-worn primer form the entire curriculum. The parent-teacher conferences, you muse, are at least very easy to schedule. You teach them their letters and numbers, while the sea outside teaches them about tides, and the sky teaches them about weather. Social historians debate the long-term psychological effects of such an isolated childhood. Did it forge an unbreakable resilience, or did it make the bustling world of the mainland, when they finally encountered it, a terrifying and alien place? The tower, once your solitary domain, now echoes with a different life. A child's small handprint on a fogged-up window pane, the smell of bread baking in the stove, a warm, comforting scent that does battle with the ever-present smell of kerosene and salt. You watch your son or daughter trace the patterns of the waves, as comfortable with the ocean's roar as a city child is with the rumble of traffic. But the fear is always there, a low hum beneath the surface of daily life, a rogue wave, a slip on a wet rock, a moment of distraction. Life on the rock is a constant balance between the profound joy of having your loved ones with you and the terrifying responsibility of keeping them safe in one of the most dangerous homes on earth. The light you keep is no longer just for anonymous ships at sea. It is for the tiny, sleeping forms in the next room. It is the light that keeps their world safe. The barrels of salted pork and dried fish delivered by the tender, once a welcome sight, have become a symbol of a long, monotonous culinary sentence. You've eaten so much salt pork, you feel you could be cured and preserved yourself. The hardtack biscuits could be used to patch a hole in the wall. The endless tins of beans and tomatoes all start to taste the same, like tin and salt and longing. The human body and the human spirit craves freshness. It craves variety. It craves a meal that doesn't taste of its own preservation. Fortunately, the solution is all around you. The same vast, dangerous ocean that you fight every day is also the most well-stocked pantry on the planet. And so, on a calm day, when the sea has settled into a gentle, rhythmic swell, you decide to go grocery shopping. This is, without question, the most dangerous trip to the market in the world. Your equipment is simple: a heavy-duty hand line, a thick cord of tarred twine wrapped around a wooden frame. At the end of the line is a heavy lead sinker and a large, brutally functional iron hook. You bait it with a small, greasy piece of salt pork, a fitting sacrifice to entice a creature that hopefully tastes nothing like it. Then you make your way to the spot. It's a specific ledge on the leeward side of the rock, a place you've learned through careful observation is somewhat shielded from the main force of the waves. The rocks here are slick with a dark green, almost black, seaweed that is treacherously slippery. A fall would mean being instantly swept into the deep churning water at the base of the rock, from which there would be no rescue. You move with the slow, deliberate care of a bomb squad technician, your boots finding familiar holds. You wedge yourself into a crevice, bracing your body against the cold granite, your eyes constantly scanning the incoming waves, always ready to brace for a larger swell. You unwind the line and lower the hook into the water. It disappears instantly into the dark green depths. The work is done with your hands, not a rod and reel. The line is your direct connection to the unseen world below. You can feel everything through it. The gentle pull of the deep current, the dull thud of the sinker tapping against a submerged rock, the soft, tentative nibbles of smaller fish. You wait. Patience is a virtue you have learned in abundance here. You watch the sea, you feel the line, and you wait for the sign. And then it comes. Not a nibble, but a sudden, violent jerk that nearly pulls the line from your hand. It's an electric, primal feeling. Fish on. The line goes taut, vibrating with the energy of a powerful, struggling creature. Now the fight begins. You don't reel. You haul, hand over hand, pulling the thick, wet line in, wrapping it around your wrist, gaining a few feet at a time. The fish on the other end fights back, making powerful runs, trying to dive for the sharp rocks below that would sever the line. Your muscles strain, and the rough twine cuts into your cold, wet hands. But the thrill of the battle, the promise of the prize, erases all discomfort. Slowly, you win. A shape emerges from the depths, a flash of silver and white in the green water. With a final, mighty heave, you pull it from the water and swing it onto the wet rocks beside you. It's a magnificent cod, 3 feet long, thick-bodied and gleaming. Its scales like a suit of armor. It flops and thrashes, its gills working, its eye a perfect, dark circle of wildness. It is a thing of beauty, a living piece of the deep ocean. But more than that, it is food, it is victory, it is a fresh meal for your family. Carrying your prize, you make your way carefully back to the keeper's quarters. The sight of the great fish brings a cheer from your children and a look of deep relief from your wife. The work of cleaning it is quick and practiced. Soon, the entire small dwelling is filled with a smell that is almost miraculous, the smell of fresh fish frying in a pan with a knob of precious butter. That night, sitting at the small wooden table, the family eats in contented silence. The fish is flaky, sweet, and delicious. It tastes of the sea, yes, but it also tastes of self-reliance. It tastes like not hardtack, and that is the most wonderful flavor in the world. The taste of fresh fish lingers as a happy memory, a brief and delicious victory against the tyranny of the salt barrel. But a new craving begins to grow, a deep cellular longing for something green. Your body yearns for the crisp snap of a fresh leaf, the earthy flavor of a root pulled from the soil. The tinned vegetables from the supply tender are a pale, mushy ghost of the real thing. You look around at your kingdom of sterile, gray granite and decide to attempt the impossible. You decide to create a garden. It is an act of profound, perhaps foolish, optimism. You are a farmer with no farm, a gardener with no ground. The challenges are absolute. There is no soil, only bare, non-porous rock. The air itself is your enemy, saturated with a salt spray that burns tender leaves like an acid. The wind is a constant thief, ready to tear any young plant from its moorings. To coax life from this stone is not just gardening, it is an act of creation, and your first task is to create the very earth itself. Your work begins after the first autumn storm, when the waves deposit heaps of dark, slimy kelp and rockweed onto the lower ledges. You spend a day gathering it, hauling the heavy, dripping seaweed up to a sheltered crevice behind the keeper's quarters. This is the foundation of your soil. To this, you add fish guts and bones from your successful catches, the occasional bird dropping you manage to scrape from the rocks, and any small organic scraps from your kitchen. You have started a compost pile, a slow, smelly, alchemical process of turning death and decay into the stuff of life. With every supply tender, you had begged for a single sack of real dirt from the mainland, which you treated with more reverence than a bag of gold, mixing it into your growing pile of made ground. But you cannot simply spread this precious, hard-won soil on the rock. The first big wave would steal it back. You must build a fortress for your garden. You become a stonemason, collecting flat, heavy stones from around the islet and carefully fitting them together, building a low-walled enclosure, a raised bed no bigger than a coffin. It is a grim, sturdy little box, designed to hold its precious contents against the assaults of wind and water. Finally, after weeks of effort, it is ready. You fill it with your dark, rich, sea-smelling soil. Now, the act of faith. You take out the small packet of seeds you've carefully preserved from the mainland. You don't have many choices. Only the hardiest, most stubborn vegetables have a chance here. Kale, a tough, curly green that seems to thrive on adversity. Turnips and potatoes, which can grow their treasure safely underground. Maybe a tough-skinned cabbage. With the care of a jeweler handling diamonds, you press the tiny seeds into the soil. Your gardening resume, you think, could now list you as a specialist in granite-based horticulture. Tending this small patch becomes a central part of your daily rhythm. You protect the emerging seedlings from the wind with a small makeshift screen of canvas. You water them sparingly with fresh rainwater you've collected, a resource nearly as precious as the soil itself. You watch them with the obsessive focus of a new parent. The failures are frequent and heartbreaking. A night of unexpectedly high winds shreds a row of young kale. A wash of salt spray from a rogue wave withers a set of potato leaves, turning them black overnight. But some things, impossibly, survive. They are not pretty. The cabbages are small and tight, looking less like vegetables and more like angry, clenched fists. The kale leaves are thick and almost leathery. But then comes the day of harvest. You reach into the dark soil of the potato bed, and your fingers close around something firm and round. You pull it out. It is a potato. It is not large, perhaps only the size of your thumb, but it is a potato that you grew here, in soil you made, on a rock in the middle of the ocean. It feels like a gold nugget, a miracle. That night, you and your family share a meal, seasoned with a few chopped leaves of your salty, iron-rich kale, and a single boiled potato, divided into 4 perfect, precious pieces. It is the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. It is the taste of a defiant, impossible, and utterly triumphant garden. It is a clear night in early autumn. The air is still, and a high, thin haze veils the stars, making the darkness feel close and heavy. In the lantern room, the great lens turns on its silent, steady axis. The beam of light it casts is sharp and powerful, a comfort to you and a guide to any vessel at sea. The night is peaceful, and then you hear a sound you have not heard before, a soft yet distinct thud against the thick glass of the lantern pane. You pause in your work, listening. A few moments later, another one. Thud. You walk to the great glass wall and look out. At first, you see nothing but the sweeping beam cutting through the hazy darkness. But then, as your eyes adjust, you see them. At the edge of the light, then inside it, are birds. Not the familiar gulls or terns of the daytime, but hundreds, no, thousands of tiny shapes, fluttering and circling in the powerful beam. It is a blizzard of living creatures, a mesmerizing, swirling vortex of wings. These are the small songbirds of the forest and field, warblers, thrushes, sparrows, on their immense nocturnal migratory journey south. They navigate by the moon and stars, and on a hazy night like this, your brilliant, steady light becomes a fatal sun, a false star that traps them, confuses them, and draws them in. The air fills with their calls, not of song, but of panic and confusion. It is a constant, high-pitched, distressed chirping that pierces the quiet of the night. They are caught in the spell of the light. They will not leave the beam, and they will not fly past it. They can only circle endlessly, calling to one another in the brilliant, terrifying glare. And as they circle, growing more exhausted and disoriented, they fly closer and closer to the source of their doom. The soft thuds against the glass become more frequent, a gentle, heartbreaking percussion. Each sound is a small body, a tiny beating heart, colliding with the invisible barrier of the glass it cannot comprehend. There is absolutely nothing you can do. Your most sacred duty, the one that supersedes all others, is to keep the light burning. To extinguish it, even for an hour, to let the birds pass, could mean a schooner lost on the rocks, a ship full of human souls doomed. And so you are forced to become a helpless witness to this beautiful, terrible slaughter. You watch the whirlwind of birds, a storm of life, drawn to a deadly flame, and you feel a profound, aching sadness. The light is a savior to man, but a destroyer to these small creatures. You are a guardian and a killer all at once. The power you wield, the power of this immense light, has a terrible, unintended cost. The ordeal lasts for hours. You try banging on the glass, hoping to startle them away, but they are too mesmerized. Finally, as the first hint of dawn begins to pale the eastern sky, the spell is broken. The rising sun provides a true navigational point, and the exhausted survivors of the night's tragedy reform their flocks and continue their journey, their desperate chirps fading with the darkness. When the sun is fully up, you take a bucket and a broom and step out onto the gallery catwalk. The sight stops you in your tracks. The iron walkway is carpeted with the small, still bodies of the fallen. There are dozens, hundreds of them. Their brilliant feathers, yellow, olive, and brown, still vibrant in the morning light. You see the delicate forms of black-throated green warblers, the spotted chests of Swainson's thrushes, their tiny, perfect bodies now limp and lifeless. The morning cleanup is a grim, silent ritual. You gently sweep the small, weightless bodies into your bucket. There is no anger, only a deep sense of sorrow for this unavoidable tragedy. Ecological historians would later study the logs of keepers like you to try and understand the immense scale of this phenomenon. But for you, it is not data. It is a quiet, personal grief, a heavy secret shared between you and the great, terrible light you serve. The rhythm of your days has found its own steady, sea-bound cadence. The chores are known, the seasons turn, and the small routines of your family provide a bulwark against the vast loneliness of the sea. It is in this state of normalcy, of accustomed peace, that danger often strikes its most terrifying blows. It begins quietly. Your child, usually a small whirlwind of energy, is quiet. He pushes his food away at dinner and wants only to lie down. You feel his forehead. It is warm. By nightfall, it is burning. The world shrinks to the size of the small bedroom in your quarters. The child you love is tossing in his bed, his breathing shallow and rapid, his cheeks flushed with a fever that seems to be radiating heat into the small room. He speaks, but his words are nonsensical, the disjointed murmurs of delirium, the familiar sounds of the tower, the distant moan of the wind, the low rumble of the surf, fade into the background, replaced by the sound of your own heart pounding in your ears and the pained, ragged breathing of your son. This is a new kind of terror. It is not the thrilling, explosive fear of a nor'easter, nor the oppressive gloom of a fog. It is a quiet, creeping, and utterly personal horror. You are helpless. There is no doctor to summon, no neighbor to run to for aid. The mainland, which you can see as a faint, dark line on a clear day, might as well be on another planet. The sea, which has been your constant companion, is now the wall of a prison, cutting you off from all hope of help. You and your wife exchange a look of pure, unadorned fear. You are completely and utterly on your own. Your only hope lies in a small, black-painted wooden box stored in the watchroom, the official U.S. Lighthouse Service medical chest. You retrieve it, your hands unsteady, and place it on the kitchen table. Opening it releases the strange, medicinal smell of carbolic acid, camphor, and cloves. Inside, small glass bottles are nestled in velvet-lined compartments, their labels written in elegant, looping script. Tincture of opium, laudanum, quinine sulfate, castor oil, spirits of hartshorn. There are tins of salves, rolls of bandages, and a small, leather-bound book, the keeper's medical companion. This book is now the most important object in your life. By the light of a kerosene lamp, you and your wife turn its pages, your fingers tracing the words as you read. The book details the symptoms and proposed treatments for dozens of ailments. You read the chapter on fevers, your fear growing with every line. Does he have the spots that indicate measles, the sore throat of scarlatina, the deep, rattling cough of bronchitis? The book is a labyrinth of terrifying possibilities. You are a lighthouse keeper, an expert in lenses and clockwork, not in the delicate, mysterious machinery of the human body. Making a diagnosis feels like an impossible, arrogant gamble with the highest possible stakes. Medical historians who study these guides often question if, in the hands of untrained people, they sometimes did more harm than good. But for you, it is your only guide. Based on the child's burning skin and delirium, you settle on the book's advice for a high fever. You spend the night in a desperate, quiet battle. You take turns bathing the child's face and limbs with cloths dipped in cool water, trying to coax the fire out of him. You try to get him to swallow a few sips of water. A tiny, spoonful by spoonful struggle against his delirium. Following the book's instructions, you crush a bitter quinine pill, mix it with a drop of molasses, and pray you can get some of the foul-tasting medicine into his system. The hours of the night crawl by. You still have to perform your duties, climbing the tower on trembling legs to check the great light, its steady, sweeping beam, now a mockery of the chaos and fear in your heart. It feels so powerful, so capable of saving strangers miles away, yet so utterly useless in the face of the crisis unfolding in the room below. The vigil is a form of torture. You sit by the bedside, listening, watching for any change, any sign. Every breath is a prayer. Every moment is a lifetime. The fate of your child is here, in this small, isolated room, held entirely in your own, terrified, loving, and hopelessly untrained hands. The fever breaks at dawn. The heat recedes from your child's skin. His breathing evens out, and he falls into a deep, natural sleep. The relief that floods through you is so powerful, it leaves you weak and trembling, a hollowed-out vessel of exhaustion and gratitude. The immediate crisis is over, but the fear it instilled does not vanish with the morning light. The raw, terrifying knowledge of your complete isolation, of how close you came to an unthinkable tragedy, settles deep into your bones. It leaves a permanent crack in the sturdy facade of your self-reliance, and into that crack, other, stranger fears begin to creep. The physical challenges of the rock, the storms, the ice, the endless labor, are things you can fight with your hands. But the greatest challenge of this life is the battle fought inside your own mind. It is the fight against the slow, creeping madness of profound solitude. The tower, once your fortress, can sometimes feel like a laboratory designed to test the breaking point of a human soul. After months of hearing only the sea and the wind, your own senses begin to betray you. It starts with sound. The low moan of the wind through a crack in the window frame begins to sound like a name being whispered. The cry of a distant gull, for a fleeting moment, sounds exactly like a baby crying. In the dead of night, you hear a soft thump from the storeroom below, and your heart ceases. Is it a barrel settling or a footstep? You start to question everything you hear, straining to distinguish the real from the imagined. The tower itself seems to have a voice, a language of groans and sighs, and in your lonely, exhausted state, you begin to suspect it is trying to talk to you. Then come the tricks of the eye. A reflection of your own face in the lantern glass at night seems to hang there a second too long after you've turned away. A shadow cast by the turning clockwork mechanism seems to detach from the wall and move on its own. You catch a flicker of movement in your periphery and spin around to find nothing there. These are the ghosts of the lighthouse, born not of spirits, but of fatigue and a mind starved for human contact. Your only roommate, you sometimes think with a grim humor, might just be a figment of your own imagination. You begin to understand why the lore of this profession is so steeped in superstition and ghost stories. You remember the tales the old boatman told you of a previous keeper at a nearby light who fell from the gallery and whose footsteps can still be heard climbing the stairs on stormy nights. Every lighthouse has its ghost, its gray man, or lady in white. Psychologists might call it a coping mechanism, a way to personify the ambient fears of death and loneliness. For you, it feels chillingly real. You find yourself observing the old superstitions without even thinking about it, never whistling into a fresh wind, for fear of it whistling back a gale, never killing a gull, because they carry the souls of drowned sailors. These small rituals give you a fragile sense of control in a world where you have almost none. The fight for sanity is a quiet, daily campaign. The routines are your strongest armor. You polish the brass with a fierce concentration, the repetitive motion, a kind of meditation. You write in your logbook the simple, factual act of recording the temperature, anchoring you to reality. You talk to yourself, not as a sign of madness, but as a defense against it. The sound of your own voice, a confirmation that you still exist. You ground yourself in the physical world, the solid, cold feel of the iron railing under your hand, the rough texture of a stone wall, the satisfying weight of your teacup. These are the real things. This is the proof. And above all, there is the light. Its steady, predictable, sweeping rhythm is the heartbeat of your world, a constant, reliable companion in the long, dark, and sometimes terrifying night. It is one last quiet night. Watch on our journey together. The sky is a vast, deep indigo, polished to a brilliant clarity by a cold, dry wind. The stars, far from any city's glow, are a dense, glittering spill of diamonds, so bright and close you feel you could almost touch them. The sea below is calm, a dark, gentle swell that whispers against the base of the rock instead of roaring. This is a night of profound peace, a peace earned through the trials of the turning seasons. You go about your duties with the deep, ingrained comfort of long practice. The lighting of the lamp is no longer a moment of nervous responsibility, but a familiar, graceful ritual. The turning of the great lens is the steady heartbeat of your world. You make the sunset entry in your logbook, the scratch of the pen on paper, a familiar, reassuring sound. The work is done. You take a warm mug of tea and step out onto the gallery catwalk, the cold air crisp and clean against your face. Leaning on the icy iron railing, you look out into the immense, starry darkness, and you reflect. You think of the person you were when you first stepped off that dory, a stranger to this rock, a stranger to this life. You remember the terror of the first great nor'easter, the feeling of the tower vibrating like a tuning fork. You remember the bone-deep exhaustion of winding the fog bell clockwork, hour after hour, in a world of gray nothingness. You remember the fear, sharp and cold, when your child was sick and the world was reduced to the space of a single, feverish breath. You remember the sadness of the birds, the endless, grinding labor of the polishing and the painting. The hardship has been real, immense. But as the beam of light sweeps past you, illuminating the dark water in a silent, rhythmic pulse, you remember the other things, the impossible, fairy tale beauty of the tower encased in ice, glittering in the morning sun, the fierce, triumphant joy of pulling a great silver fish from the sea, the quiet miracle of eating a single, tiny potato that you grew yourself in soil you made from the sea's leavings. You think of the profound, quiet companionship you found here, not with other people, but with the rock itself, with the rhythm of the tides, with the light you serve. Philosophers might debate the paradox of this life, whether it diminishes you by its isolation or enhances you by its purity. You know only that it has stripped you down to your essential self. It has taught you the vast difference between loneliness and a chosen, purposeful solitude. You have become an expert in things no one on the mainland understands. You can tell the weather from the sound of the waves. You know the names of the stars, your only neighbors on a clear night. You have seen beauty and terror on a scale that few will ever witness. You look up at the great, turning lens, this magnificent, fragile heart of glass and brass. You are its keeper. Its purpose has become your purpose, to hold a single, steady light in the vast darkness, to be reliable, to be a promise made to unseen strangers. In the quiet of the night, you realize you are no longer just a man on a rock. You are a part of the light itself. And now, as our time here on the rock comes to a close, the steady sweeping beam of the great light begins to soften. The sharp, brilliant stars overhead blur into a gentle, hazy glow. The constant, soft whisper of the sea fades into a distant, rhythmic hum, like the sound of a fan in a quiet room. The cold iron of the railing seems to dissolve, and the solid stone of the tower melts away into the peaceful, easy darkness. All the work is done. The storms have passed. The logbook is closed, and the great light continues its watch, turning slowly, faithfully, through the night. It needs no more help. It keeps its vigil so that you and all the other souls in the quiet darkness can finally rest. The night is calm, the sea is peaceful, and it is time, at last, to drift off and to sleep.